are in, now I know where we are in terms of the chapter. I thought I had bookmarked exactly where we left off 2 weeks ago, and I'm not sure if I bookmarked the right spot, so bear with me if we go over just a little bit of this. Then my goal is to get through it and get down to do the questions today, at least to start the questions on page 80 of lesson 5, case study in Old Testament prophecy 2. Well, the questions are on page 80, but we're not there yet. That's where I intend to get. That's where my plan is, to try to get there to those questions. 80, page 80. No problem. I'll speak louder. So, we're talking about this. We're in 2 Kings chapter 18 and 19, actually, I think, where we are. We're talking about, we've gotten past Jeroboam. All right, so I wanted to, we're talking about this prophecy concerning Sennacherib, and who's the king of Assyria. So as we're going to be talking, I thought I might provide a number of slides so you could see where the Assyrian Empire was. And so I have a couple of slides, and they're about the same, but they're just presented in a little different way. And so keep in mind, as we're talking, Egypt is down here to the south west, and there's the Mediterranean Sea, and here is Judah. There's the promised land, a little small strip, but the Assyrian Empire is this vast area that's up to the east, and the Assyrians and the Egyptians historically, just remember, they were not friends. They were not friends of each other. This is just another rendition. This is just a color rendition of the same map. It is just a color version of the same thing. That's all. So the Assyrian Empire here is just in color. That's this, it goes through this area, with Nineveh being its capital city. And here's a third, again, just different renditions of the same thing, so you can get an idea of where the Assyrian Empire. So here, this map has the Assyrian Empire in the gold, outlined by the gold, and you can see how far it was. Some cities that you might remember: Tarshish, Nineveh, of course, and then Babylon down in the lower part of the empire. So just wanted to give you that, keep that in mind. We left off talking where 2 Kings 18, where Sennacherib had come, the Assyrians, they had surrounded Jerusalem, and they were threatening the Jews with capture, and bragging about how they were going to destroy Jerusalem like they had done all the other cities. And Hezekiah, for whatever reason, gets weak-kneed. Instead of trusting God, he yields for some reason, and he decides he's going to pay tribute to these individuals. Yes, as Jerry said, he chickened out. Now that, and that's about where we left off. And when you're studying this at home, sometimes you'll want to read 2 Kings 18 and 19 and then drop over to Isaiah chapter 37, because you're going to observe Isaiah, the prophet, is going to discuss some material parallel to this. But that's not for us to do today, but it's just I want you to keep that in mind. Sennacherib was not satisfied with the 300 tons of tribute that he wanted, but he wanted to destroy, he wanted to take the Jews captive and everything else. And when his emissaries come to talk to Hezekiah, they blaspheme the God of heaven. And they try to intimidate Hezekiah by bragging about what all they had done and how they had treated their prisoners. Now, remember earlier, how many cities had they already captured of the south? 46. They had already captured 46 of the cities in the south. And they're now in camp. They want to take the capital. But God says that's not going to happen. Finally, Hezekiah realizes he's a servant of Almighty God. And Hezekiah realizes this, and he decides, I need to go to the God of heaven and ask God for assistance. And then in 2 Kings chapter 19, verse 14, Hezekiah decides, and he takes the letter that Sennacherib and his emissaries had sent, and he goes up and he spreads the letter before the Lord in the Lord's house in Jerusalem. Now, why he waited, we don't know. Brother Jerry says he was chicken. Well, he trusted in himself more than he trusted in God at that particular time. But note what he says there. In essence, he says, Lord, I want you to read what these but I was thinking of some other words. These blasphemers are saying about you and about how you, Jehovah, you don't have any power, any ability to take care of your own people. That's what these folks were saying. Your God cannot take care of you. We've seen that wonderful song, God Will Take Care of You. They had said some ugly things about God and how God would not be able to deliver them, and they were bragging about how what they had done to other people. Notice first, they just real quickly back in 2 Kings 18, verse 21, they accused them of trusting in Egypt. They call, you are trusting in the staff of this broken reed, Egypt, on which if a man leans, it will go into his hand and pierce it. So remember I said the Assyrians have they don't care about the Egyptians. They're sworn enemies of the Egyptians. Then they go on, and they say, verse 25, have I now come up without the Lord against this place to destroy it? The Lord said to me, go up against this land and destroy it. They speak very disparagingly against God. And look at verse 32. They start telling the people, do not listen to Hezekiah, lest he persuade you, saying, the Lord will deliver us. Has any of the gods of the nations at all delivered its land from the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods? And so they start going through and they talk about all the countries they've conquered and these deities of these various countries. And then will your God deliver you? Well, they're going to find the hard way that, yes, God is going to deliver them. God heard the prayer of Hezekiah. And in the 28th verse of chapter 19, he sends a message back to the Assyrians. And this will call to mind what we looked at a little earlier. Notice what he says, and I'm going to read from two different translations, the American Standard of 1901, and then I'm going to read from the New King James. Verse 28 of 2 Kings 19, because of your raging against me. So God is saying, here it's talking about Sennacherib. Sennacherib the king, he is raging against Jehovah. Because of your raging against me and because of your arrogancy has come up before me, I will put my hook in your nose. Now, that's important. These are images of whenever Sennacherib would conquer countries, they'd go back to Assyria, to Nineveh, and his artisans, they would etch these pictures in stone, and so these are images that are found. They've been able to find the tablets, and so we can see some of the things. And when they destroyed Lachish, the people came before them, came before the king, and this is a relief of Sennacherib on his throne. And we have historic records of what they would do. And this is what they did to the children of Israel that they captured in those 46 cities. But they would put chain hook in their nose, bind them, and lead them back to Nineveh, lead them out of where they've captured them from. And the whole idea is to humiliate them, to make sure that the people saw this and that others would see you can't win against us. So he thought. And so God says, this is what the Ramshika said to Hezekiah. This is what they were going to do to the people in Jerusalem. And God heard that. And so God says to him by prophetic utterance that because you rage against me and your tumult have come up to my ears, therefore I will put, now notice God says he will put his hook in your nose and my bridle on your lips. And I will turn you back by the way you came. You need to highlight that because God is saying, we're going to see who has, in essence, God is saying, I'm going to show you the prophetic word. I'm going to show you who has true power. That's right. And we're going to be able to see those things fulfilled when God said they would be fulfilled. And this shows us the value of the historic record, but also the fact that the Bible is indeed true. So Wayne says, I'm going to turn the tables on you, fella. Now, let's jump ahead a little bit. Verse 32, we read a little further. Therefore, thus says Jehovah concerning the king of Assyria. The prophet Isaiah is the one speaking now. And he's bringing this message to the king. He shall not come in unto this city. It is important to note that, and even secular records document this, that Sennacherib never conquered the city of Jerusalem, never got into it at all. Now he bragged, we have records of Sennacherib bragging about all the cities he's conquered. Remember his emissaries came and talked about they did this to that city, they did this to this nation, and all of, well, we'll see if Sennacherib goes back or if he talks about this in future events. Nor shoot an arrow there, neither shall he come before it with shield, nor cast up a mound against it. If the Assyrians were to do any of the things that Isaiah said they were not going to do, we would not have any, we would have no need of saying, or let me rephrase that. We would not be able to trust the word of God. If there was one piece of archaeological evidence, if there was one piece of historical evidence which showed that the Assyrians did go into the city of Jerusalem, if the Assyrians did put siege to it, no need to trust the Bible. But just the opposite is available for us. And so, in verse 33, by the way he came, by the same shall he return. He shall not come unto this city, saith Jehovah. For I will, now, what was the accusation earlier by them against God? He can't defend it. So now God says through Isaiah the prophet to Hezekiah, you let these folk know, I will defend this city to save it. The army of Jerusalem is not going to do a thing. But God will defend the city. And he tells them why. And for my servant David's sake. And that's an important component. God had made a promise to David. And I'm going to have to go back. In our scheme of redemption chart, somewhere here, I think it's in there. Oops, too fast. Okay. So you remember here, God had made a promise, and all of these events that are going on, and so God had made a promise to David that he would bring about the Messiah. Jerusalem would play an important role, and before God had said, I'm going to take care of Jerusalem. that promise is made to David in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 12 and 13. And so, because from the law would go forth from where? From Jerusalem. Jerusalem's not going to get destroyed, because God has a plan, and that plan is to bring forth. Now, they don't know what it is yet, but here in Jerusalem, the law, Isaiah chapter 2, the law is going to come from Jerusalem. And so God has a plan, and he's going to work his plan, but no heathen king is going to cause his plan not to be fulfilled. David, who had already been dead, but God says, nope, nothing's going to happen because I have a plan, and it's going to work its way out. So you should highlight those things. Now notice carefully verse 35 in 2 Kings 19. And it came to pass, now American Standard says that night, New King James says on a certain night, that the angel of the Lord, or the angel of Jehovah, I'm in 2 Kings chapter 19, verse 35. The angel of the Lord, we've covered this before, but let me just reiterate this. The word means messenger. Context has to tell you what kind of messenger it is. In a number of places in the Old Testament, the messenger, however, does refer to the Lord in his pre-incarnate state. When we preached on and talked about the character, the nature of the Christ, we looked at a number of passages where we saw the Christ in the Old Testament. And so he acting as the messenger of Jehovah. When Abraham was offering Isaac, his son, the messenger of Jehovah was present, and it was the messenger of the Lord, depending on which translation. The American Standard says messenger of Jehovah, the angel of Jehovah, is the one who directs him not to hold your hand. It is, you remember when we looked at in the men of Lot, when those three men appeared, one of the three was the messenger of Jehovah. It's clearly seen as you read through that whole series of discussions there. And as they go out and they just get ready to destroy, as the cities get ready to be destroyed, the angel of the Lord is present. At the burning bush, the angel of the Lord speaks to Moses. And so just a number of places where we're talking about the Lord in a pre-incarnate condition. So it goes on, he says, the angel of the Lord went forth and smote the camp of the Assyrians 185,000, or in current translations, 185,000. 185,000 soldiers were killed by Jehovah. Not by Hezekiah, not by any army, but God during the night. Yes, Frank? Mm-hmm. Well, as Frank said, he hadn't thought about it much, but so here's God fighting. He said he would fight for his city. He would fight for Jerusalem. He would defend the city. He didn't. Now, there are times when he's told the children of Israel to do certain things, but here, because he needed to point out to these individuals that their heathen gods has no power over him. And when he makes a prophetic utterance, it will come to pass the way he has said it would come to pass. And when men rose early in the morning, meaning the Jews who were on the other side of the wall, when they rose early in the morning and they looked over the wall to see, you remember last 2 weeks ago I said, they were on these embankments and they were having these discussions, yelling across at each other, and the city of Jerusalem's up on a higher level so that the king could walk out. Everybody's inside the walls and where they feel safe, and he looks out over down in the valley where the enemy was, and all they could see in the sun were corpses. Yes, a news. And it's interesting, he used that phrase. I was reading today in another in a book dealing with the excavations that they found, and they've dug up a pit where bodies were just on top of each other. They believe they have found this area, and they've unearthed like 2,000 soldiers, the bodies, the bones just there on top of each other. And most historians believe that's part of what happened, where they just, they were just there, and they just left them there. Got buried, and the Jews probably buried them in this pit. Now, as Wayne says there, he says, okay, you file that point away. So we've kind of jumped ahead to look at some broad things. And we're going to go back and circle around and look at some specific things. In the first part of 2 Kings chapter 19 and verse 6, Hezekiah has approached the prophet Isaiah. And you can put a note here to go, to see Isaiah chapter 37. And note clear, and I have written out in the side, in the margin of my Bible, the word prophecy. As 2 Kings 19, verse 7, is the prophecy that God has given that we're talking about. So we've already, we're working at this kind of backwards. We've seen the fulfillment. Now we're going to go back and take a look. Here is the prophetic statement that God has made. Surely I, the word I, the antecedent for that is God. The prophet Isaiah is telling him, he says, you go back and you tell him, he says, surely I will send a spirit upon him. The him of 2 2 Kings 19, verse 6, is Sennacherib. And he shall hear a rumor and return to his own land. And I will cause him to fall by the sword in his own land. Now here's a very specific prophecy by God. He's telling, so he says, Hezekiah, you tell, or Isaiah, you tell Hezekiah this is what's going to happen, and you let the king know this is what's going to occur to him. So Isaiah the prophet, who was asked to plead to the Lord on behalf of the people, says this is what will occur. And Isaiah told him, look, don't be afraid of the words that this man has said in verse 6. He said, look, do not be afraid, Hezekiah. Isaiah the prophet tells Hezekiah, do not be afraid of whatever words this man and his emissaries have said. You must put your trust in Almighty God. Don't worry about his words, because God will take care of you. And so, here's the prophecy. And Wayne says, draw a box around it and look at the incredible elements. He says, behold, the I, it's God. God is going to put a disposition, he's going to put an inclination into Sennacherib, to cause Sennacherib to do an about-face. Some historians try to say that which caused Sennacherib to turn around and leave Jerusalem was that, remember I said the Egyptians were not their friends? That, he heard that there was an army coming up from Egypt, and he decided that he was going to leave Jerusalem and, turn tail and go back to Nineveh. Well, the one thing we do know about Sennacherib, he was not afraid of the Egyptians. So that doesn't make any sense, that he would all of a sudden become afraid of Egypt after what he had said about Pharaoh. What did he call Pharaoh before? A broken reed. He says, you put your trust in that broken reed from Egypt, and if you do, you're going to hurt yourself. Now, he realized that there was some power that was greater than anything he had ever seen in all of his campaigns. I don't know about you. If you go to bed at night, you got your army there. The city of Dayton is about 160,000 people. That's the current population of the city of Dayton. Think about that. City of Dayton, 160,000 people. How many soldiers died? 185,000. More people than are in the city of Dayton. So can you imagine if all of a sudden you wake up tomorrow morning and every citizen in the city of Dayton is dead and you can see them dead? Jerry just said it. It is a frightening thing in anybody. So think about it. The city of Dayton, 160,000 people. You wake up, your army, you know how many people you have out there, and you get the message, they're all dead. The bodies are, no, what happened? No, they're just dead. There are no spears in them, no arrows. They are, as John Shannon would say, they are graveyard dead. And they're smelling. They're dead. A whole city of men laying on top of the other, body on top of body on top of body. Now, I thought when any of you ever gone to anybody ever been to Gettysburg? Yes. I've been to Gettysburg, to the museum, to the I've taken a tour through it, seen some of the pictures, and they talked about the number of bodies during the war that were killed on the battlefield. None of them ever amounted to 185,000 people on one field. You just can't fathom. Now, I say all of that to get this mental picture. Oh, God did something to him when he saw and heard that his 185,000 army was all dead. That would put a disposition in anybody to say, I don't think I need to mess with this God. It is time to skedaddle. And he did. He marched back the way he came. He went back to Nineveh. He learned that Jehovah does rule in the kingdoms of men. The psalmist declares that God is the one who rules in the kingdoms of men. And so Wayne suggests two theories, a minor theory, which I just gave you, and then his stronger theory is that God changed his mind simply because of what he saw. God put this spirit in him, in the sense of God is the one who accomplished the defeat of his army overnight. And he saw the evidence of the power of Almighty Jehovah. No army, just the messenger of the Lord. And so you can write next to verse 7, see verses 36 and 37. Now, let's see how far we can go. Sennacherib leaves. We go back. Now go later in the chapter. Verse 36 says, so Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and went away. So he saw all the corpses. He departed and went away, returned home, and remained at Nineveh. So he's defeated, and he heads back up here to Nineveh. He goes to hide in his capital. He doesn't go back victorious, though. You see, before, he would go back and he'd go back and sit on his throne bragging about what he's done. You can read the history books. Thank you. You can read the history books. And, no, it's my they talk about, the Assyrians have written about going to Jerusalem, but they don't lie and they don't say, we conquered them. They acknowledge that they got there and they returned. But that's all they say. He returned. He returned. He doesn't talk, he doesn't brag, doesn't talk about how many he brought back. with rings in their noses and all that stuff. He came back with the ring in his nose, with the hook. Even though it wasn't literal, he came back with his tail between his legs. But notice, and then here's the other thing that occurs. God had told him what was going to take place. Remember, he said, I will cause him to fall by the sword in his own land, at the end of verse number 7. So in verse 37, now it came to pass as he was worshiping in the temple of Nisroch, his god. So Sennacherib is back in Nineveh, his capital city. He's in his pagan temple, worshiping his pagan god, who is supposed to be so bad. We've defeated all these other people. Our God is, all right, well, let's see. Yes. So, let me go back. Yeah. I didn't put a current map up there, but you can get an idea of so you can see where Assyria is, and if you have, I could have one of those overlays, but if my memory serves me correctly, I didn't bring that Bible out. I have one that has current map, but I think that part of that is Iraq, because Turkey would be further. Let's see. So there's the Black Sea. You have the Scythian, that's the Caspian. So Turkey would be further up, but yes, I think that would be. Yeah, Nimrod. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. Which would be modern Iraq. Yes. We're getting close to time. All right. Yeah, we've got a couple minutes to finish this up. Then. We're at verse 37. The temple of Nimrod, his god, that his sons, Melech and Sharezer, struck him down with the sword. So two of his sons assassinated their father while he was worshiping. But you go back to verse 7, that's what God said would happen to him. And they escaped, meaning the two sons, into the land of Ararat. Then Esarhaddon, his son, reigned in his place. He went back, and 20 years he sat in Nineveh for 20 years, made some other campaigns, but in the 20 years when he went back to Nineveh, after having been kicked out of Jerusalem by God, he had some other military campaigns, but not against Jerusalem. He never captured Jerusalem. He didn't siege it. He didn't shoot an arrow into the city. So we see how God takes care of his own business. When God says he's going to do something, we can trust God. Now, it may not happen in the time that we want or in the manner in which we want, but God did what he said he was going to do, and you have a very clear prophetic example of God. And one of the reasons why we use this example is because he is working even in non-Jewish kingdoms, meaning God is not just the God of the Jews, but God is the God of everyone. And so God does involve himself in humanity. And sometimes people fail to understand that. And as we keep in mind God bringing about his ultimate plan, that is the Christ, God was involved with all nations, not just the Jews. All right. So, work on page 60, or rather page 80, page 80, the 24 questions for chapter 5, or lesson 5. Let's get those out of the way. And also your reading assignment will be Isaiah 44, 20, verse 24 through chapter 45, verse 13. That's going to be the case study in Old Testament prophecy, part 3, and we will be looking at Cyrus, the king of Persia, an important person in biblical and world history. It's right there in your book. Yeah, the homework, okay. Page 79, bottom of page 79. Last paragraph. I'm sorry? Okay. But before that, I said, make sure you've done lesson 5, study questions 1 through 24. That's what we will start with next week. Lesson 5, the study questions. And then we will begin lesson 6, talking about Cyrus, king of Persia, an important character in Bible history. And we'll see God is involved with this man because he calls him by name. He tells what he is going to do, and then it happens. And I think I had you think about, so the Medes and the Persians, so there are the Medes and the Persians up there. They will come to power after which empire? After the Babylonians. All right. Let's pray, and then Lyle has the announcements. We thank you, dear God, for predictive prophecy. We pray